Hey there, story lovers. Here's another beautiful story for you. If you're hooked on stories that keep your heart racing, the kind packed with twists, tension, and just enough romance to make things interesting, you're in the right spot. Hit that like button real quick. It keeps these edge-of-your-seat stories coming. Quick question. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing story lovers from all corners of the world. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the next wild ride. Let's dive in. Minjun walked through his front door with Soo-yeon on his arm, her red dress catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. His wife Diana stood in the kitchen, 7 months pregnant, stirring something on the stove. Diana meets Soo-yeon. No explanation. No apology. Just a statement delivered like he was introducing a new business associate. Diana's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. She turned slowly, her dark eyes taking in the glamorous woman clinging to her husband's bicep. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. She'll be staying with us for a while, Minjun continued, his voice carrying that edge of authority he used when he expected no resistance. You don't mind, do you? The question was rhetorical. Minjun Kim didn't ask permission in his own home. As one of Seoul's most feared mafia bosses, he'd built an empire on the simple principle that his word was law. What he said happened. Who he wanted, he got. Diana set the spoon down carefully. Of course not. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. That's what had attracted Minjun to her initially. That gentle quality, the way she seemed to bend rather than break. After years of dealing with violence and betrayal, he'd wanted something pure, something untouched by the darkness he trafficked in daily. I knew you'd understand. Minjun's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're too weak to cause problems anyway. The words hung in the air like smoke. Soo-yeon shifted uncomfortably, but Diana just nodded and turned back to the stove. Too weak. Minjun had said it before, but never quite so cruelly. Never with a mistress standing right there to witness the humiliation. Diana's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the spoon again, and Minjun noticed with satisfaction. Control confirmed. Dinner will be ready in an hour, Diana murmured. We won't be eating here. Minjun was already heading toward the bedroom, Soo-yeon trailing behind him. I'm taking Soo-yeon to Gangnam, that new place on Apgujeong. The bedroom door closed. Diana stood alone in the kitchen, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her elevated heart rate. She exhaled slowly through her nose, a breathing technique she'd learned 15 years ago in a monastery in Guangdong province. Back when she was someone else entirely. Back when Diana Chen wasn't her name, when she was known by a different title altogether, the Dragon of the South. But that was another life. A life she'd left behind when she fell in love with a man who had no idea what she was capable of. Minjun knew she was Chinese, knew she'd moved to Korea 8 years ago, knew she worked as a translator before they met. Everything else about her past was carefully, meticulously buried. He didn't know about the underground fighting rings in Hong Kong. The gang war she'd ended single-handedly at age 19. The reason why certain triad bosses still whispered her name with a mixture of reverence and terror. Diana had walked away from that world. She'd wanted peace, a normal life, maybe even happiness, though she'd learned not to expect too much of that particular emotion. When she met Minjun at a diplomatic function, she'd seen through his legitimate business facade immediately. Recognized the violence behind his eyes because she'd lived in that same darkness. But she'd also seen something else, a loneliness that mirrored her own. A hunger for something real in a world built on lies. She'd thought they could save each other. Clearly, she'd been wrong. Diana moved through the kitchen methodically, putting away the food she'd been preparing. Her movements were precise, economical. Nothing wasted. Years of training had made efficiency second nature. The baby kicked again. A son, the ultrasound had revealed. Minjun had been pleased about that. An heir to his empire. Someone to mold in his image. That thought alone made Diana's jaw tighten. In the bedroom, she could hear Minjun's voice, low and intimate as he spoke to Soo-yeon. Laughter filtered through the door. Diana closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. Finding that calm place at her core where emotion couldn't reach. She'd gotten too soft. That was the problem. 3 years of playing the role of dutiful wife had dulled her edges, made her forget what she'd been, what she'd had to become to survive. But the muscle memory was still there, buried but not dead. like coals under ash, just waiting for oxygen. Diana walked to the window, looking out over Seoul's sprawling skyline. Somewhere in this city, Minjun's enemies were plotting. She knew how it worked, the constant chess game of power and territory, alliances and betrayals. Minjun thought he was invincible, but she'd seen enough arrogant men fall to know better. The smart move would be to leave. Take her baby and disappear before the inevitable happened. She had resources Minjun didn't know about. Identities already prepared. Money hidden in accounts he couldn't trace. She could be gone by tomorrow. But leaving had never really been her style. Behind her, the bedroom door opened. Soo-yeon emerged first, her red dress slightly rumpled. Minjun followed, adjusting his tie. He didn't look at Diana as they headed for the front door. "Don't wait up," he said over his shoulder. The door closed. Their footsteps faded down the hallway. Diana stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then she moved to the closet in the guest bedroom, the one Minjun never bothered opening. Behind winter coats and storage boxes, there was a false panel. She pressed it, and the panel swung open. Inside was a locked case. Diana's fingers moved over the combination lock with practiced ease. The case opened. She looked down at its contents. Identification papers from 5 different countries, currency in various denominations, a burner phone, and wrapped in silk cloth, 2 butterfly swords. The blades caught the fading sunlight, gleaming like they'd been forged yesterday instead of passed down through 3 generations of her family. Diana's hand hovered over one of the hilts. Then she closed the case and the panel, leaving everything untouched. Not yet, but soon. 3 days passed. Minjun didn't come home the first night, or the second. Diana moved through the penthouse like a ghost, maintaining routines that no longer meant anything. She organized the nursery, folding tiny clothes with mechanical precision, prepared meals that nobody ate, slept alone in a bed that still smelled faintly of her husband's cologne. On the 3rd evening, Minjun returned. Soo-yeon wasn't with him. He looked exhausted. Lines creased his forehead that hadn't been there a week ago. When he dropped his keys on the counter, his hand shook slightly. "You're home," Diana said from the kitchen doorway. Minjun looked up, seeming surprised to find her there, as if he'd forgotten she existed. "Business has been complicated." That was his way of saying dangerous. Diana recognized the signs, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept flicking to the windows, the gun bulge under his jacket that he usually concealed better. "Are you hungry?" "Not really." He poured himself a drink. Whiskey neat, downed it in one swallow and poured another. Diana watched him in silence. This was a man on edge. Whatever was happening in his world, it was bad enough to crack his usual composure. "Where's Soo-yeon?" she asked. "Safe house in Itaewon." Minjun drank again, slower this time. "The Yakuza are pushing into our territory. They've already hit 2 of my warehouses." The Yakuza. That explained the fear. Minjun had always been careful to avoid conflict with the Japanese syndicates. They were too powerful, too well-connected. If they were moving against him directly, someone had given them permission. "How bad?" Diana kept her voice neutral. "Bad enough that I'm considering sending you to Busan until things settle." Minjun finally looked at her directly. "You and the baby should be somewhere safe." Something cold slithered down Diana's spine. Not fear, calculation. Minjun only showed concern when he was genuinely worried, which meant the threat was imminent. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning. I've already made arrangements." The lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the penthouse. Diana's body reacted before her mind processed what was happening. Shifting her weight, lowering her center of gravity, hands moving into a defensive position she'd trained for 10,000 hours. "Power outage," Minjun muttered, but his voice carried uncertainty. Diana's eyes adjusted quickly. She could see his silhouette moving toward the window. Outside, the neighboring buildings still blazed with light. Only their building was dark. That wasn't an outage. "Minjun." Her voice was sharp. "Get away from the window." He turned, probably to ask how she dared give him orders. The window exploded inward. Glass shattered in a crystalline spray. Minjun dove sideways as bullets punched through the space where he'd been standing. The distinctive crack of suppressed gunfire filled the air. Diana was already moving. She grabbed Minjun by the collar and hauled him toward the hallway, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward but not impossible. Years of training had taught her how to compensate for physical changes. What the hell? Minjun started. Shut up and stay down. Diana's voice had changed. No longer soft. No longer submissive. This was command. More gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the living room, shredding furniture. Professional pattern. Multiple shooters. They were painting the apartment systematically, ensuring no one inside could survive. Diana pulled Minjun into the bathroom, the only room without exterior windows. She could hear footsteps in the hallway outside their front door. They'd breached the building. How many men do you have in this building? She demanded. Minjun stared at her like he'd never seen her before. 2. Downstairs in the lobby. They're dead. Diana stated it as fact. The breach had been too clean, too coordinated. Who else knows you're here? Just my inner circle. And... He stopped. His face went pale. Suyun. Diana processed that information in a fraction of a second. Either Suyun had betrayed him, or she'd been compromised. Either way, the attackers knew exactly where to find Minjun. The front door exploded inward. She heard it from the bathroom. The distinctive thump of a breaching charge. Stay here, Diana said. Diana, what are you? She was already moving. Out of the bathroom, down the hallway, her body falling into patterns older than her marriage. Older than her life in Korea. For men entered through the ruined doorway. Professional. Black tactical gear. Faces covered. Weapons raised. They saw a pregnant woman and hesitated for exactly 1 second. Diana didn't. She closed the distance before the first man could adjust his aim. Her hand struck his wrist, redirecting the gun toward the ceiling. Her other hand drove into his throat with surgical precision. He went down gurgling. The second man fired. Diana was already inside his range, too close for the rifle to track her. She grabbed the weapon's barrel, twisted, and heard his trigger finger snap. Her knee came up into his groin, followed by an elbow to the temple. He dropped. 10 seconds. 2 down. The third and fourth men were smarter. They spread out, trying to bracket her. Diana grabbed a floor lamp, hurled it at one man's face. While he flinched, she dove low, sweeping the other man's legs. He hit the ground hard. She stomped on his weapon hand, crushing bones, then delivered a kick to his jaw that bounced his head off the hardwood floor. The last man had recovered. His rifle swung toward her. Diana snatched the gun from the second man's broken hand and fired 3 times. Center mass. The attacker's vest stopped 2 rounds, but the third caught him in the throat. He collapsed. Silence rushed back in, broken only by Diana's controlled breathing and the ringing in her ears from the gunfire. She stood in the ruins of her living room, surrounded by 4 incapacitated men, a gun steady in her hand. Behind her, Minjun emerged from the bathroom. He stared at the scene, at the bodies, at his pregnant wife holding a weapon like she'd been born with it. Diana. His voice cracked on her name. What? Who are you? Diana didn't answer. She was already moving to the door, checking the hallway with practiced efficiency. Clear for now, but more would come. They always did. We need to leave. She grabbed Minjun's arm, but he jerked away. Don't touch me. His eyes were wild. Who the fuck are you? Your wife. Diana's voice remained calm. We can discuss my resume later. Right now, we need to move before the second wave arrives. Second wave. Minjun looked at the 4 men on the floor. How do you? Because I've planned operations like this. Diana checked the magazine in her stolen gun. 17 rounds left. Not enough. She moved to the nearest attacker, efficiently stripping him of ammunition and a backup pistol. They send the breach team first. When that team doesn't report back, they send cleanup. We have maybe 3 minutes. Minjun watched her move. Every gesture was precise, professional. This wasn't panic or adrenaline. This was training. Deep training. The kind that took years to develop. You knew how to fight. It wasn't a question. This whole time. Yes. Diana pocketed the extra magazines. Why didn't you tell me? She finally looked at him directly. Because you wanted a weak wife. I gave you what you wanted. The words hit him like a physical blow. Minjun opened his mouth, closed it. For once in his life, he had nothing to say. Diana's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression darkened. We're out of time. There's a team entering the stairwell. How do you know that? I have the building's security feed on my phone. Had it since we moved in. She moved to the window, looking down at the street below. 23 floors up. We can't go down. They'll have the exits covered. Then we're trapped. No. We go up. Diana was already heading for the door. Minjun grabbed her shoulder. Wait. Just wait a second. His hand trembled against her. I need to understand. Are you working for someone? Is this a setup? Diana met his eyes. Behind the fear, she could see something else. Betrayal. The man who trusted no one had trusted her. And now he was realizing that trust might have been misplaced. I'm not working for anyone, she said quietly. I retired from that life before we met. Everything between us was real. Retired from what? Footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Getting closer. Later, Diana pulled open the door to their apartment. Move. They ran down the hallway to the emergency stairwell. Diana led them up instead of down. Minjun followed, his mind clearly racing. Every assumption he built about his life was crumbling. 2 flights up, Diana stopped at a door marked Roof Access, authorized personnel only. She kicked it open with a precision strike to the lock mechanism. Since when can you kick down doors? Minjun panted. Since I was 17. Diana scanned the rooftop. Empty. For now. Stay behind me. The Seoul skyline stretched around them, a sea of lights under the dark sky. Wind whipped Diana's hair around her face. She moved to the edge, looking down at the neighboring building. 3 meters away. 2 stories lower. We're jumping. Minjun stared at the gap. You have a better idea? Diana, you're pregnant. I'm aware. She studied the distance, calculating trajectory and impact. She'd made jumps like this before, but never 7 months pregnant. The added weight would affect her landing. Behind them, the roof access door burst open. 3 men emerged, weapons raised. Diana didn't think. She grabbed Minjun and ran for the edge. His shout of protest was cut off as they launched into empty space. 3 meters. In normal circumstances, an easy jump. But with 40 extra pounds and a shifted center of gravity, Diana had to adjust midair. She twisted, positioning herself to take the impact on her side instead of her stomach. They hit the adjacent roof hard. Diana rolled, absorbing the shock, pulling Minjun with her. Pain lanced through her hip, but nothing felt broken. The baby kicked furiously, probably as startled as his father. Bullets sparked off the concrete where they'd landed. Diana dragged Minjun behind an air conditioning unit. Are you insane? Minjun gasped. Frequently. Diana returned fire, forcing the shooters to take cover. Keep moving. They ran across the roof. Diana found another stairwell entrance and shot out the lock. They plunged into darkness, taking stairs 2 at a time. Where are we going? Minjun demanded. Parking garage. 2 buildings over. Diana's breathing was elevated but controlled. I have a vehicle there. You have a vehicle? Where? I told you. I'm prepared. They emerged into a parking structure. Diana led them to a nondescript gray sedan tucked in the corner. She pulled keys from a magnetic box hidden under the wheel well. Minjun stared. How long has this been here? 3 years. Since we moved into the penthouse. Diana unlocked the doors. Get in. They climbed inside. Diana started the engine and pulled out calmly, like they were heading to dinner instead of fleeing assassins. 3 years, Minjun repeated. You've been planning an escape for 3 years. Not an escape. Diana navigated through the garage. A contingency. There's a difference. Is there? Diana didn't answer. She was focused on the street ahead, watching for threats. The attackers would regroup, expand their search. But she'd bought them time. Minjun slumped in the passenger seat, his world view shattered. Who are you really? Diana Chun. Your wife. Mother of your child. She glanced at him briefly. Everything else is just history. History. He laughed bitterly. You just killed 4 men like it was nothing. You knew exactly how many bullets were in that gun. You jumped off a fucking building while pregnant. That's not history. That's training. Professional training. Diana's hands tightened on the wheel. I was a fighter. Underground circuits in Hong Kong and mainland China. That's how I learned. It wasn't the whole truth. But it was enough truth to satisfy his immediate questions. A fighter. Minjun processed this. That's why you're so calm. You've done this before. Yes. How many times? Diana's jaw set. Enough that I never wanted to do it again. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. Diana took a winding route through Seoul's streets, doubling back twice to ensure they weren't followed. Minjun stared out the window, processing everything he thought he knew about his life. Finally, he spoke. "Where are we going?" "Itaewon. To get Soo-yeon." Minjun's head snapped toward her. "Are you serious? She might be the one who set this up." "She didn't." Diana's voice carried certainty. "How do you know?" "Because if she wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." Diana turned down a side street. The Yakuza don't need elaborate raids to kill one man. This was designed to look like a gang hit, but it wasn't. The timing, the precision. Someone wanted it to appear like your enemies finally caught up with you. Minjun frowned. "You're saying someone from my organization did this?" "I'm saying someone wants control of your territory and your connections. Killing you isn't enough. They need it to look like your rivals did it. That way, they can step in as the natural successor without suspicion." The analysis was flawless. Years of navigating underground politics had taught Diana to read power plays. This hit wasn't about revenge or territory disputes. It was about succession. "Lee Tae-won," Minjun said slowly. "My second in command. He's been pushing for more autonomy lately." "Does he have Yakuza connections?" "His mother was Japanese. He spent summers in Osaka growing up." Minjun's expression darkened. "Son of a bitch. I trusted him. Everyone has a price." Diana pulled into a narrow alley behind a luxury apartment complex. "Wait here." "Like hell." Minjun reached for the door handle. Diana caught his wrist. Her grip was gentle but immovable. "Minjun, I'm going alone. These people don't know me. If you walk in there and it's a trap, we're both dead. And if something happens to you, then you drive to the port of Incheon. Pier 17. Ask for Captain Zhang. Tell him the dragon sent you. He'll get you out of Korea." Diana released his wrist. "But nothing's going to happen to me." Before he could argue, she was out of the car and moving toward the building's service entrance. Minjun watched his pregnant wife pick the lock in under 15 seconds and disappear inside. He sat in the dark car, feeling utterly useless. His whole life, he'd been the dangerous one, the man people feared. Now he was being protected by a woman he'd called weak 3 days ago. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so humiliating. Diana moved through the apartment building like smoke. Silent. Invisible. She knew Soo-yeon was on the 4th floor, apartment 412. Minjun's safe houses were all logged in his phone, which he'd left on the bathroom counter during the attack. Careless. But men like Minjun didn't think they needed to be careful. They thought power made them invincible. 4th floor. Diana approached apartment 412, listening at the door. Voices inside. At least 3 people. She tested the handle gently. Locked but cheap hardware. She knocked. Room service. Silence. Then footsteps approaching. The peephole darkened as someone looked through. Diana stood slightly to the side, holding a phone to her ear like she was checking an order. Harmless. Pregnant. Non-threatening. The door opened a crack. A man's face appeared. "We didn't order." Diana's palm strike shattered his nose. She drove through the door, using his falling body as a battering ram. The door flew open, and she was inside before the second man could react. He reached for a gun. Diana was faster. She grabbed his wrist, twisted, and drove her knee into his liver. He went down gasping. The third person was Soo-yeon. She sat on the couch, hands bound behind her back, a gag in her mouth. Her eyes went wide when she saw Diana. Diana checked the rest of the apartment quickly. Clear. She returned to Soo-yeon and removed the gag. "Diana." Soo-yeon's voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your life, apparently." Diana worked on the ropes binding her wrists. "Who are these men?" "I don't know. They grabbed me yesterday. Kept asking me about Minjun's schedule." Soo-yeon rubbed her wrists as the ropes fell away. "I didn't tell them anything." Diana studied her. The fear in Soo-yeon's eyes looked genuine, but Diana had learned long ago that appearances meant nothing. "What's your real name?" Soo-yeon froze. "What? Your real name, your agency, and why you were assigned to Minjun." Diana's voice was flat. "Don't waste my time with denials." For a long moment, Soo-yeon just stared. Then her shoulders sagged. "Park Ji-hai, National Intelligence Service. I was assigned to monitor Minjun's connections to the Vladivostok smuggling routes." "Does he know?" "No. And I was never supposed to get this deep. It was just supposed to be surveillance." Ji-hai looked miserable. "But then Lee Tae-won approached me 2 weeks ago. Said he knew who I was. Threatened to expose me unless I helped him. Helped him how? Feed him information about Minjun's movements. His security protocols. Jihai's voice cracked. I didn't have a choice. If my cover was blown, my career would be over. Diana absorbed this information. What was the plan? Kill Minjun during the Yakuza attack. Make it look like a gang war casualty. Lee takes over the organization with his Japanese connections, and I disappear back to my normal life. Jihai met Diana's eyes. I swear I didn't know he'd actually go through with it. I thought it was just contingency planning. You're either incredibly naive or incredibly stupid, Diana said. Probably both. I know. Jihai looked ashamed. I know. But when those men grabbed me yesterday, I realized Lee was cleaning up loose ends. I'm a witness who can connect him to the hit. Diana's phone buzzed. A text from Minjun. 2 cars just pulled into the alley. Armed men. She moved to the window. 6 men were spreading out below, covering exits. Professional formation. Lee's cleanup crew. We need to leave, Diana said. Now. How? They have the building surrounded. Diana smiled without humor. Then we go through them. Diana dragged one of the unconscious men to the window. Put on his jacket. Pull the hood up. Jihai understood immediately. She stripped the jacket off the man and shrugged it on. With the hood concealing her face, she could pass as one of Lee's men from a distance. When we get downstairs, you walk out first. Move like you're on patrol. I'll be right behind you. Diana checked her gun. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just walk to the gray sedan in the alley and get in the back seat. What about you? I'll be fine. Diana moved to the door. Ready? Jihai nodded, pulling the hood lower over her face. They descended the stairwell. Diana could hear voices echoing from below. The strike team coordinating their sweep. She counted 3 distinct voices, which meant 3 more were outside. 2nd floor. A man stood guard at the landing. He looked up as Jihai appeared, saw the jacket, and started to nod acknowledgement. Then he noticed Diana behind her. Pregnant. Wrong. His hand went to his radio. Diana closed the distance in 2 steps. Her hand clamped over his mouth while her other arm wrapped around his throat. A perfect rear naked choke. He struggled for 5 seconds before going limp. She lowered him quietly to the ground. Keep moving, she whispered to Jihai. Ground floor. Through the service entrance door, Diana could see the alley. 2 men stood between them and the car. Minjun was visible behind the wheel, tension evident in his posture. Walk, Diana murmured. Jihai pushed through the door. The 2 men glanced at her, registered the jacket, and returned their attention to watching the street. Diana followed 3 steps behind, one hand in her jacket pocket, fingers wrapped around the pistol. They were halfway to the car when one of the men frowned. Hey, who's the pregnant? Diana shot him through her pocket. The suppressed round made a muffled cough. He dropped. The 2nd man spun toward her, reaching for his weapon. Diana's 2nd shot caught him in the chest. He staggered back against the wall and slid down. Go! Diana shoved Jihai toward the car. Jihai ran. Diana backed toward the vehicle. Gun trained on the building entrance. Shouts erupted inside. They'd heard the shots. She dove into the passenger seat. Drive! Minjun floored it. The sedan's tires screamed as they rocketed out of the alley. Behind them, men poured from the building, weapons raised. Bullets sparked off the pavement. Who's in my back seat? Minjun demanded, weaving through traffic. Your mistress, who's actually a government spy. Diana twisted to check their pursuit. 2 cars were following. Also, your 2nd in command is trying to kill you, and he hired the Yakuza as cover. Minjun absorbed this information while taking a corner hard enough to make the tires protest. So it's Tuesday, basically. Despite everything, Diana almost smiled. There was the man she'd married. The one who met chaos with dark humor. Lee Tae-won, Jihai said from the back seat. He's been planning this for months. He has support from at least 4 of your lieutenants. Which 4? Choi Park-hwang and Kim Sung-ho. Minjun's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Half my inner circle. They're meeting tonight at the warehouse in Gangnam. The one you use for the import operations. Jihai leaned forward. Lee plans to consolidate power by morning. Anyone loyal to you is being eliminated tonight. A bullet shattered the rear window. Diana returned fire, forcing the pursuing car to swerve. We need to get off the streets. They have too many eyes. The embassy district, Minjun said. Heavy police presence there. They won't risk a firefight. He turned sharply onto a wider boulevard, heading toward the diplomatic quarter. The pursuit cars fell back slightly, unwilling to draw attention in a high-visibility area. Diana's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Mrs. Kim. Lee Taewon's voice was smooth. I hope you and your husband are well. Lee. Diana's voice was ice. This is a mistake. Is it? I don't think so. Minjun was always too sentimental. Too soft. He let his organization stagnate while opportunities passed us by. Lee paused. But I didn't call to explain myself. I called to offer you a deal. I'm listening. Walk away. Take your baby and disappear. I'll even provide resources, money, documents, whatever you need. In exchange, you let Minjun face his fate. He's already dead, Mrs. Kim. His lieutenants have turned. His connections are being absorbed. The only question is whether you die beside him or live to raise your child. Diana glanced at Minjun. He was listening, his expression carefully neutral. That's a generous offer, Diana said slowly. Diana, Minjun started. She held up a hand, silencing him. But I have a counter-proposal, Lee. You and your co-conspirators leave Korea by morning. If you do, I'll let you live. Lee laughed. You'll let me live? Mrs. Kim, with all respect, you're a pregnant woman married to a finished man. What exactly do you think you can do? I think I can kill everyone you love before you manage to kill me. I think I can dismantle your organization from the inside out. I think I can make you wish you'd stayed loyal. Diana's voice never rose above conversational. But mostly, I think you've never met anyone like me before. That's going to be your last mistake. Silence on the line. When Lee spoke again, the amusement was gone. Who are you? Someone you shouldn't have threatened. Diana ended the call. Minjun stared at her. Did you just declare war on my entire organization? Our organization, Diana corrected. And yes, we're outnumbered at least 20-1. I've faced worse odds. When? Minjun demanded. When exactly have you faced worse odds? What the hell were you before we met? Diana looked out the window at Seoul's glittering streets. Before we met, I was the most dangerous person in East Asia. I'd hoped I wouldn't have to be her again. She turned to face him. But for you and our child, I'll become her one more time. They abandoned the damaged sedan in a parking garage and switched to a taxi. Minjun gave an address in Mapogu, a neighborhood where he still had loyal contacts. The driver kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror. A pregnant woman, a man in an expensive suit, and another woman in an oversized jacket. Quite the picture. Diana's mind was already working through scenarios. Lee had numbers and infrastructure. But he'd made a critical error. He'd underestimated her completely. Most people did. It was her greatest advantage. We need allies, Jihai said quietly from the back seat. I can reach out to my handlers at NIS. If we give them enough evidence of Lee's operations, they'll intervene. No. Diana's response was immediate. The moment government agencies get involved, this becomes political. Minjun gets arrested along with everyone else. We need to handle this internally. Internally? Jihai's voice rose. Diana, these are professional killers. Dozens of them. I'm aware. Minjun had been silent since her declaration. Now he spoke, his voice measured. You said you were the most dangerous person in East Asia. What did you mean? Diana watched Seoul pass by outside the window. The city where she tried to build a normal life. Where she'd pretended to be someone she wasn't. I was 15 when a triad enforcer killed my father over a territory dispute. My mother died 6 months later. Grief, officially. Opium overdose, actually. Diana's tone remained flat, clinical. I had no family, no money, no protection. So I learned to fight. Started in underground rings for food money. Turned out I was good at it. How good? Minjun asked. By 17, I'd won 43 consecutive fights. By 19, I'd killed the man who murdered my father, along with his entire crew, 12 men. By 21, I'd ended a gang war that had lasted 15 years by systematically eliminating the leadership on both sides until they had no choice but to negotiate peace. The taxi driver's eyes in the mirror went wider. Diana noticed but didn't care. They called me the Dragon of the South. Triad bosses paid me to solve problems they couldn't solve themselves. Other times, I was the problem they needed solving. She flexed her hands, remembering. I did that for 7 years. Then I walked away. Why? Minjun's voice was barely audible. Because I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the person staring back. Because I'd become the same kind of monster who'd killed my father. Diana met his eyes. Because I was tired of being covered in blood. The taxi stopped at their destination. Minjun paid the driver, who couldn't get away fast enough. They stood outside a nondescript office building. According to Minjun, the 3rd floor housed a legitimate import-export business that served as a front for one of his oldest associates, a man named Park Dong-min who'd worked with Minjun's father. Inside, they took the elevator up. The office was empty except for an elderly man sitting behind a desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed shipping manifests. He looked up as they entered. His expression shifted from surprise to concern when he saw Minjun's condition. Minjun, what happened? Lee Taewon happened. Minjun approached the desk. I need your help, Uncle Park. The old man stood slowly. I heard rumors of unusual movement tonight. Vehicles mobilizing. Men gathering at the Gangnam warehouse. His eyes moved to Diana, then Ji-hai. This is serious? Lee's attempting a coup. He's already made his move. Park Dong-min absorbed this information with the calm of someone who'd survived decades in a violent business. How many are with him? At least half the organization. Maybe more. And how many are with you? Minjun hesitated. Right now? Just us. Park was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to a cabinet and pulled out a phone. Give me 2 hours. I'll call everyone who remembers what loyalty means. While Park made his calls, Diana studied the office. Maps of shipping routes covered one wall. Standard business for an import company. But her trained eye caught the subtle markers. Coded notations, hidden routes, the infrastructure of smuggling operations. Ji-hai approached her quietly. Can we actually win this? Define winning, Diana said. Survive. Stop Lee. Keep Minjun alive. Diana considered the question honestly. Lee expects Minjun to run or hide. He's prepared for a wounded animal trying to escape. He's not prepared for what I'm about to do. Which is, cut the head off the snake. Diana turned to face her. Lee's meeting with his co-conspirators at the Gangnam warehouse. All of them in one place, celebrating their victory. That's where we strike. That's suicide, Ji-hai said. They'll have 20, maybe 30 armed men there. Good. I hate having to hunt people down individually. Diana checked her gun, reloading with the ammunition she'd taken earlier. You're going to help me get inside. How? You're NIS. You've been trained in infiltration. Diana met her eyes. You're going to walk in there as Lee's newest